Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Zapier webinar. My name is Maria, and I'm a member of the Client Success team here at CASEpeer. Today, we will be going over the Zapier integration. We'll be going over what Zapier is, how to activate the Zapier integration, and how to build a Zap using the new trigger, which is a received client text message. If at any point during this webinar you have a question, please feel free to type your question into the question box on the right-hand side of your screen, and my colleague Leah will help answer the questions that come in. All right, so to start off with today's webinar, I wanted to go over some key terms that I'll be using throughout the webinar. So to start off, what is Zapier? So Zapier is a tool that allows you to connect your favorite web apps and move information between them automatically. So Zapier can allow you to connect apps like CASEpeer to apps like Gmail. And you can do that by building a Zap. Now, a Zap or an automation is what connects CASEpeer to the other apps like Gmail, Slack, and all of the other apps that Zapier integrates with. And this is done by using trigger events and action events. Now, a trigger event, that is the event that needs to happen in CASEpeer or another app, and that tells Zapier to execute an action in a different app, in the action app. So there's a trigger app, that's where the trigger event takes place. Then there's the action app, that's where the action is executed. Now, the action that is executed is called an action event. So the action event, this is an action or an automation that will occur if the trigger takes place. So the action event can be something like sending an email, a Slack message, or maybe you use a different app to get notified. So those would be the action events. Now, to go over the relationship between triggers and actions a little bit more, it's basically an if-then situation. So if the trigger event happens in the trigger app, then the action event will happen in the action app. And so CASEpeer with Zapier has a few different options for triggers and the action. So we have 3 triggers right now. Those are a case status change, a new lead, or a received client text message. So you can use one of these triggers so that you can be notified of any of these situations happening in a different app if you'd like. And then right now, CASEpeer has an action, which is creating a new lead. So if your firm uses some other app to generate leads, or maybe you use like a Google form or a Gravity form, and you want to be able to have those leads coming into CASEpeer, you can use CASEpeer's action event to create a new lead. So those are the basics before we get started actually clicking around in Zapier. Now that we've gone over some of those basics, we're actually going to go here into Zapier now. So to start off with Zapier, if you create an account and you have a free account, you'll have up to 5 Zaps that you can create. The upgraded account will have a bit more options for you, but this is what Zapier looks like. And so right now I'm on my dashboard, and here I'm going to put in a couple of examples so we can really understand the relationship between a trigger and an action. So here, this first app that I would enter here, I want to connect this app, and then it says ... with this one. So the first app I enter in here, this would be my trigger app. So let's say I want to connect CASEpeer here, and I want to connect CASEpeer to, let's say, Gmail. So Gmail would be our action app. And now it tells us when this happens, then I would select a trigger, then do this, then I would select the action event. So here you can see our 3 triggers. We have a case status change, a new lead, or a received client text message. So we can choose one of these. Let's say I want a case status change. And then let's say I want to automate an email to be sent to the client. So I can do it within Gmail. Gmail has some actions here. One of those is sending an email. So this is an example of a Zap that you could create using this integration. So you can connect CASEpeer, And whenever a case status change happens in CASEpeer, then an email will be sent in Gmail. So this again, trigger event and trigger app. And then this is the action event, action app. And so if you're starting out in Zapier and you still want to understand the relationship between a trigger and an action, I definitely recommend going to the dashboard and just playing around with this little workflow box over here. Now we're going to move on to how you can connect your CASEpeer account to Zapier and how you can activate this integration. So in order to do that, you want to go into CASEpeer here. You're going to copy the API key. That can be found from the gear icon in your account settings. It's going to be at the bottom of the account settings with the other integrations we offer. So here at the bottom, you'll see the Zapier integration. Now the button here, it's going to say activate if you have yet to activate it, but you would just click the button. And what you want to do is you want to copy the API key here. So make sure you copy it to your clipboard. So that would be Control or Command C. And before you exit, make sure you save. That's a very important step. So after you've copied the API key, click Save. Now what we have to do is we'll go back into Zapier here, and now we're going to connect CASEpeer as our app. So I'm going to go on the left-hand side here over to My Apps, and then I'm going to connect Zapier to CASEpeer. So here you would do Add Connection, and you would search for CASEpeer. So here you would select CASEpeer. Let me share my entire screen here. Give me 1 second. Let's see. Okay, so now here's my entire screen. So once I wanted to add the connection, this is the pop-up window that comes up. This is where you would paste in your API key, and then you would click Yes, Continue. So that is how you can connect CASEpeer to Zapier. I'm going to exit out of this window. I've already connected to CASEpeer in the past, we can see here. So if I go into CASEpeer, this is how you can verify whether you've actually connected. So this is the connection I'll be using today for our webinar. And if I go back, this is also where you can add other connections to other apps. So you can use Zapier with other apps like Gmail, maybe Google Sheets, maybe Slack, any of those other apps that you use to stay notified or updated on your cases. Those would be good apps to add connections to here. So Zapier, again, connects with a lot of other apps, and there are resources where you can look through all of those different apps. But this here, My Apps, this is where you can put in those initial connections. So now that we've activated the integration, we connected CASEpeer with Zapier, now we can go ahead and actually build a Zap. Now to do that, again, you can start in the dashboard here, use this little workflow shortcut, or you can use this Create Zap button here. There's also the Zaps section, and there's that same Create Zap button over here. So if I create a new Zap, again, today we'll be using the new client text message trigger. So here, this is what your screen will look like when you're first creating a Zap. Let me zoom in a little bit here. Okay, so first you have to choose the trigger app. Now remember, this is where the trigger event will take place. So I'm going to use the received client text message. So that means our Zap will begin in CASEpeer. So here I would search for CASEpeer. And now I'm going to choose what our trigger event will be. Today, we'll be going over the received client text message. At the end of our webinar, if I have some time, I'll show you an example of some other Zaps that I've created using the case status change and the new lead trigger. But for this example, we'll be doing the received client text message. So this is where our Zap will start, and we'll go ahead and continue. Now you want to choose which account, which CASEpeer account. We already added the connection, so it should show up here. This is the one we'll use for today. And I'll go to continue. Then you'll want to test your trigger. This will tell you if you've connected properly to CASEpeer, and the test will be successful here if you successfully connected. And then here, there's an example of one of the text messages that was found in our CASEpeer account. So now I'll go ahead and go to continue. All right, so now we've set up our trigger app and our trigger event. Now we need some kind of action to happen. So what do I want to happen when a new text message is received in CASEpeer? Do I want to be notified? Do I want an email? So for today, I'm going to do my action app as Slack, and the action event will be a Slack message. That's how I want to be notified about a client text. If you use a different app, you can set up notifications in that app, or again, you can set up an email to be sent to you whenever the client sends a text message. So here, I'm going to select Slack, and then you would have to choose the event that's going to happen whenever a text message is received in CASEpeer. So I want a channel message to be sent. So right now, this action step here, this is going to be specific to the apps that you use. So you may not necessarily have all of the steps that I have. But here for Slack, I'm going to send a channel message. I'll go to continue, and I've already connected my account before. Actually, let me refresh this. Give me 1 second here. Let's see. Okay, this is the correct one. So now I've connected my Slack channel. So now I'm going to select where it will actually send into Slack. Now for context, I'll show you my little Slack workspace here. This is just an example. Here I have a Slack workspace set up, and I have a channel here called client text. This is where I want all of those Slack messages with the text notifications to show up. So that's why I'm selecting the channel as client text here. All right. Now I'm going to set up what will actually be sent in the Slack channel. So I can say there's a new client text. And now I'm going to pull from the actual data that was coming in from CASEpeer. So when that received client text message came in, these are all of the fields that CASEpeer is sending over to Zapier that you can use and pull into a Slack message or an email or whatever app you're using. So here, let's say I want the actual text message itself to be in the Slack message here. And then let's say I also want the client's name here. Let's say I want their first and their last name. Notice I put a space in between so that there will actually be a space between John and Smith. If I don't put a space here, there will not be a space between the first and last name. So you want to type this message exactly as you want it to appear in Slack. And then what's nice about the new client text message trigger is that you can include a link to the case. So at the bottom of this Slack message, I can have a link to the case so I can easily access this case. Now, let's say these are all of the fields that I want to include. Again, there's a bunch of other information that you can put into this message, but I want to keep it simple here with just the text, the client's name, and a link to the case so I can reply. Now, these other fields here, you can see the first two are the only required fields. These other fields down here are optional, so I'm just going to leave them blank or leave them as they are right now. And if I go to the bottom, I'm going to click continue, and now it's going to ask me to test this action. And if the test is successful, we will see this new client text message. This will send as a Slack message here. So I'll go ahead and test and continue. And now if I go into Slack, let's see. And we can see here, we have that message that just sent this Slack message. It says new client text. My appointment went well. This is the actual text message itself here. We have the client's name. And then I also have a link to the case. So if I go here, if I click on this link, it would take me into CASEpeer so I can view the case and then reply to the client's message. So that is what my Zap will do. Once you have successfully tested each step in the Zap, so right now I have 2 different steps. I have the trigger and the action. Now I can turn on the Zap. So now I've turned on the Zap. And now I'm going to test it from my own phone. So give me 1 second here. Let's go back into Slack. And now I'm going to test it on my phone. So I'm already connected. I'm opted in for texting on one of our cases in my CASEpeer account. So now I'm going to send a text message from my phone acting as a client right now. So the text message I'm going to receive is, "Hi, did you receive my email this morning?" That's the text I'm sending. So I'm going to send now. And now, immediately after I sent it, it says here, "Hi, did you receive my email this morning?" It says the client is Samantha Roberts. And now if I click on the link here, it will take me straight to Samantha Roberts' case. So I can go ahead and go to the phone icon here and reply to this text message. So that's how you can use the new received text message trigger. All right. So if anyone has any specific questions on this Zap that I just created, this would be a great time to put in those questions. And of course, you want to name your Zap. That's something that I missed here. So I would want to do something like new text message. Maybe I want to do new client text message here. And then I'll do Slack. So I know that the notification will send in Slack. So if I go back, now I have this new Zap turned on. And again, the way this Zap works, whenever a new text message is received in CASEpeer, I will receive a Slack message in my client text Slack channel here. All right. So that's the client text trigger. We saw, let's go back into our other tab here. All right, so there's a few other triggers a couple of other triggers you can use. There's a case status change, and there's also the new lead. Now let's see here. I have a new lead notification Zap already set up here, so let's take a look. So this one is using CASEpeer as the trigger app, and then again, the trigger event is a new lead. So this is if you want to be notified about any new leads that come into CASEpeer. And just to refresh, the new leads will come in under the main menu home icon, under management, and leads. So if you want to be notified about each lead that comes in here, you can create a Zap to do that. So here, you would use the new lead trigger event. You would choose which CASEpeer account you're connecting to. And then you want to make sure that you have a successful test so you know that Zapier is connected to CASEpeer properly. And then you would want to set up the action. So how do you want to be notified about this new lead? Here, I set up an email. So whenever a new lead comes into CASEpeer in this lead management screen, I'm going to have a new email sent to myself. So here, if I go into choose app and event, I have Gmail. The event is sending an email, of course. I've connected to my own email account here. And now the action itself here, if you're trying to automate an email, you want to choose who the email will be sent to. So here, I'm just sending this email to myself so I can be notified about the new lead. It is also coming from my own email here. And then I put the subject as new lead in CASEpeer. And here, this is the body of the email that we'll send. So I have the name of our potential client here. I have the incident. So I have the accident type and then on the date of incident here, and then the client's phone number. Again, with each of these triggers, it pulls a lot of other information from CASEpeer, so I can choose to put in some of these other fields into the email if I wanted to. And then I labeled this as inbox. And if I go to continue, You always want to make sure to test your Zaps before you turn them on so you can be sure that they will be successful and they will work. And then I can turn on this Zap. And so just to go over how this Zap would work if I turn it on, that means whenever a new lead comes into CASEpeer, I will receive an email, and the content of the email will have the name of the client, their case type, date of incident, and phone number, and the subject will be a new lead in CASEpeer. And this email will send from myself to myself whenever a new lead comes in. So that is an example of how you can use the new lead trigger. Let's go back to my other Zaps here. And you can also use the case status change trigger. So here I have a case status change. This is specifically when a case moves into treating, and I have automated a client welcome email. So let's take a look at this one here. So here again, our trigger app is CASEpeer, and the trigger event now is using the case status change. Down below again, you always want to test your trigger. And what's nice about testing the trigger is you can see all of the fields that will come in from CASEpeer whenever this trigger happens. So this gives you an idea of what you can actually extract from CASEpeer here and move into a different app, or things that you can include in your notification. So these are all the fields I can include in my email that I'm automating here. And so that again, trigger step here. And then here I have a special step. I have an extra step. I do want to let everyone know these extra steps are called multi-step zaps. So if there's more than just the trigger and the action, if you have multiple actions here, that's considered a multi-step zap, and those are only available with an upgraded Zapier account. And you can always contact Zapier for more information on the different plans that they have. But here, I have an extra step here. So first, the trigger is a case status change, but let's say I don't want to be notified of every single case status change. Maybe I just want to have something happening whenever the case moves into the treating case status. And so I can create an extra step here using filter by Zapier. And this will check to see if the case status exactly matches treating. So that means this specific Zap will only continue if the case status exactly matches treating. And if not, that means that this Zap will not continue. The email I have down here will not send. And so if I go to continue, it says my Zap would not have continued. And this is based on the test sample data here from our test trigger. If we verify here, we can search for the case. Oops. See, it would be case status here. And we can see the case status is intake. And then my filter here is only continuing if the case status matches treating and intake is not treating. And so, of course, the Zap would not have continued. So this is normal to see if this filter that you have here, or if the test data over here does not pass the filter that you've set up. And so that's how you can have certain emails sending only for certain case statuses. So here, this is for treating. Now that I've filtered to only have the treating case status changes, I'm going to send a client welcome email. So here, I'm choosing Gmail. Again, my action event is sending an email. And then here, the actual action itself, I'm sending this email to the client. So here, I've selected the client's email. And then I decided to copy the case manager onto this email so they can also see. And then here, it would be sending from the account, the Gmail account that you've already connected Zapier to. That's in the My Apps section. Here it says it's from my name, and this is an important field that you might want to fill out whenever you have automated messages or emails sending to clients. You want to be sure to put a reply to email. So here, if the client replies, it will send to their case manager. My subject is a new client welcome, but of course you can change this. And the actual body of the message here, it says, "Hi," the client's first name, "welcome to our family of clients." At the bottom, I have the case manager's information, the name of their case manager. And of course, you can customize this with more of the fields that CASEpeer has pulled in for you. And so this is just an example of a basic welcome email to the client whenever their case moves into treating. And so I can go ahead and click continue. And so now if I were to turn this Zap on, the way it would work is, let's say in CASEpeer, I go into one of my cases here, and I were to move, let's say this case was in intake and I moved it into treating. That means Zapier will say, "Hey, we had a case status change. Yes, it exactly matched treating." Now Paige Thompson would receive this welcome email that I have set up here. So that's an example of how you can use the case status change trigger. All right, let's go back to our Zaps. Now, previously in my little presentation, I also mentioned CASEpeer's action event. So CASEpeer does have one action event here. So let's say this is in the situation where you have your leads coming in from a different app or a different source. That's not one of the integrations CASEpeer already has. So let's say it's something basic like a Google form. You have potential clients filling in Google Forms here, and you want all of those Google form entries to come into CASEpeer to make a new lead. So here I would go to CASEpeer. And so I can say whenever there's a new response to this Google form, then a lead will be created in CASEpeer. So this is an example of when CASEpeer is the action app, and then the action event is creating a lead. So whenever you're using CASEpeer as the action app, it can be coming from any of the other apps that you use, and so you can create a lead from that other app. I have an example of a Zap that I've already created using these two exact apps here. So Google Forms into CASEpeer. So if I go into my Zaps, here I have a Google form to a CASEpeer lead. So here, let's just take a look here. So here my trigger app is Google Forms, and my trigger event is a new response to my Google form. And if I go down, I have it filtered a little bit just so it only accepts responses after a certain date. But here at the bottom, this will create a lead in CASEpeer. So here, whenever you're creating a lead, you're going to match up the fields that are brought in from your trigger app. So this is if you're going from a different app into CASEpeer. So here, I'm just choosing the fields that are available from my Google form. So here, I'm going to match up the client's first name to the first name, last name to the last name from the Google form, and then the email field. Notice those three are required. And you also want to have the date of incident added in here. And at the bottom, of course, you always want to test your action. And if I test this action, it's going to send a lead into CASEpeer. And so that's how this Zap works. Whenever a new response is added into my Google form, then a new lead will be created in CASEpeer. So I can go ahead and create that person as a new client or decide not to move forward. All right, so that's CASEpeer as the action app and using the create lead action event. All right, so again, now is a good time if anyone has any specific questions on any of the triggers or even the action of creating a new lead. We've tested our Zap that we created today, and now I just want to do a quick little overview and summary of everything we've gone over so far. So again, now is a good time to put in any final questions. So we'll go back to my first slide here. This would probably be a good slide to screenshot, especially if you're going to watch a replay of this webinar. So In Zapier, you're building zaps or automations, and these zaps or automations use trigger events in a specific trigger app. And once the trigger happens, then an action event will take place in the action app. Again, that is an if-then situation. So if the trigger event happens in the trigger app, then the action event will happen in the action app. Again, CASEpeer has 3 different triggers. We have a case status change, a new lead, or a received client text message. These triggers can be used so that you can set up maybe automated notifications in other apps, automated messages, automated emails. That's how these triggers can be used. If you're using CASEpeer's action of creating a new lead, that's because your firm uses some other app or some other lead generator, and you need those leads to come into CASEpeer. So that's how you can use our triggers and actions there. We went over how you can activate the Zapier integration in your account settings here. Again, at the bottom, you want to go in and copy the API key from Zapier. Make sure you copy and make sure you save. And then you'll go into Zapier, go to My Apps, and then you'll connect to CASEpeer and paste in the API key. Once that's done, you want to add some other connections to other apps that you use. So apps like Gmail, Slack, maybe RingCentral, other apps that you use. And then you can start to create and build your zaps using our 3 triggers or using the action of creating a new lead. Now, there's a lot that we went over today, and of course, I want to highlight the resources that you have available. And so you can always reference our Help Center. It's always linked at the bottom left of your page here. So if I click Help Center, you can search through all of our different help articles, maybe even watch some help videos here. We do have some articles that are specific for Zapier here. So if I go into the Zapier integration, I have this exact article here on how to create a Zap using the client text message trigger. This is the Zap that you saw me build today with CASEpeer and Slack. So you can always reference this article to see a step-by-step of how I created my Slack notification. Let's go back here. I also have another Zap walkthrough here where I use the CASEpeer create lead action. So this is if I have a Google Sheet where I add in all of my new leads and I want those leads to come into CASEpeer. So you can always reference this article. And then the last article is just a refresher on how to activate the Zapier integration. So always reference our Zapier integration section here. And what's nice about these two articles here with the Create a Zap, they actually have a link at the very bottom of the article here. So you can actually save a copy of the Zap I created and customize it so that it works with your specific CASEpeer account and your specific Slack account. So that's what's nice about those 2 articles. So always feel free to reference our Help Center there. And if you ever have any specific questions on how to use CASEpeer's triggers or the action, or you're running into some issues with your Zap, if it's specific to CASEpeer, you can always feel free to first search through our Help Center, reference those articles I have. And here with our help bubble at the bottom right, you can always live chat with us as well. And if you're having specific issues with your Zapier account, you can always feel free to reach out to Zapier's support team. If you have questions on the different plans that they offer, please feel free to reach out to Zapier as well. All right, so now I'm going to check on our questions, make sure all of the questions have been answered. Let's see. All right, so all the questions have been answered. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. Again, if you need any help, we have a bunch of different resources in our Help Center, and you can always reference this recording. Let's see here. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.